The day is November 29th, 2012, and the San Antonio Spurs are finishing off a 6-game road trip in Miami. It's a nationally televised game, and the Spurs' 4th game in 5 nights. 72 hours after a double OT victory north of the border in Toronto, and 24 hours after beating the Magic in Orlando. The San Antonio Spurs are ready to face off against the Big 3 Miami Heat, but the NBA got some weird news a few hours before tip-off. The San Antonio Spurs just came off from having the best record in a shortened 66-game season. After winning their first 10 playoff games in 2012, the Spurs lost 4 straight games and were sent home in the Western Conference Finals to the Oklahoma City Thunder. The very next season, fans expected no less from the Spurs, as they finished the past 2 seasons with the best record in the Western Conference. In just 16 games into the 2012-13 season, the Spurs were already off to a hot start, starting with a 13-3 record. However, after a shortened lockout season with more back-to-back games than ever, Greg Popovich had an idea in mind. A few hours before tip-off against the Miami Heat on November 29, 2012, Greg Popovich, the head coach for the Spurs, decided to rest 4 out of his 5 starters that night. Those 4 starters were Tim Duncan, Danny Green, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, plus a 21-year-old Kawhi who was out with a quad injury. The league, the fans, the TV announcers were livid, and understandably so. Most of us know this as load management, as it is more common than ever in today's NBA, but in 2012 and before, load management was something nobody talked about or even considered. The Miami Heat went on to beat the Spurs 105-100 that night, and the league was not happy with Greg Popovich and the San Antonio Spurs. The commissioner David Stern stated, "The Spurs did a disservice to the league and our fans." And the very next day on November 30th, 2012, the NBA fined the San Antonio Spurs $250,000. Greg Popovich knew there was a long season ahead, and the year prior, his Spurs finished with the best record in the NBA, but with more back-to-back games than ever due to the shortened season, it was obvious that the fatigue caught up to the players. So Pop had to try something different. Greg Popovich knew this wasn't going to be a popular decision, but he wanted his players to have longer careers and play deep into the postseason at an elite level. At the time in 2012, load management was a completely foreign idea. But fast forward 10 years later, and we got half of the superstars in the NBA taking part in this tradition. The Spurs did make the NBA Finals in 2013, but were 1 win away from the NBA championship. And in 2014, the Spurs finished with the best record in the NBA again and won the title that year as well. So from the outside looking in, this strategy was looking like a success. As Popovich's first 2 seasons trying this out, he made the NBA Finals and won the title the very next season in 2014. Fast forward to the 2018-19 season, Kawhi Leonard got traded from the Spurs to the Raptors, and he took his load management with him north of the border. Only playing 60 out of the 82 regular season games, the Raptors finished with 59 wins and second in the Eastern Conference. And do you know what happened in that year's playoffs? Kawhi played in every single playoff game looking like a god who came from the sky, and the Raptors won their very first NBA title. It was now getting to a point where other teams in the NBA were starting to realize how effective this strategy has become. And in today's NBA, it has been completely normalized. We have seen the Clippers do it with Kawhi and Paul George, the Pelicans with Zion Williamson. Jimmy Butler did make it up to that one fan, but he's also a player who sat out a lot. And it's gotten to a point where the NBA had to take action. Starting this upcoming 2023-2024 season, the NBA's collective bargaining agreement, the CBA, now enforces that an NBA player must play at least 65 out of the 82 games in the regular season to qualify for MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, All-NBA, Rookie of the Year. You get the point. That means players must play at least 79% of the games in the regular season, which is basically 4 out of every 5 games, to be in the discussion for these awards. And it may not sound like that many games, but you will be surprised by how many players haven't reached that limit this past season. When looking at the All-Stars in the 2022-23 NBA season, 11 out of the 27 All-Stars played no more than 65 games. And yes, you don't need a certain amount of games to make the All-Star team, but this list of names includes LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Damian Lillard, Giannis, Tyrese Halliburton, Paul George, Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., who all would have been eligible to win awards this year if those rules were in place. This past season, only 180 players played 65 or more games. Out of the 539 players who played in the NBA last season, that's only 33% of the league. And yes, a lot of those players were guys who were on 10-day contracts who most of us never heard of, but that's still a very small percentage. We also got to take in that injuries factor into this as well. And we all know that for some reason, injuries the past couple of seasons have skyrocketed from like 10 plus years ago. Is it the faster pace of the game? I don't know, and I'm not going to get that much into it because I ain't no sports doctor or scientist. But going back to load management in the NBA, whether people like it or not, it has shown in the past 10 years in the NBA that load management does indeed have a positive impact on the players. As the season is 82 games long, and these athletes play and practice almost every single day for hours on hours for at least 6 months straight, it's completely understandable why these players feel the need to take rest days every once in a while. The NBA also added an in-season tournament that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, but this will help reduce load management, as a big reason of it was players not taking the regular season seriously. The reward for winning the tournament is $500,000, and I'm sure the young players are going to take these games seriously. But it was obvious that resting during the regular season to save themselves for the playoffs was a clear advantage, and the NBA is trying ways to fix this issue. But I'm excited to see how this plays out. Greg Popovich started something he knew he would get a lot of backlash for, but would be extremely clever and beneficial in the long run. I'm sure we can all agree that the load management we have seen in the past few years in the NBA has gotten way out of hand. And these new rules implemented this upcoming season hope to change just that. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.